I'm Mr. Beat, and I'm in love with the US Constitution. It's like my favorite Constitution ever, seriously. However, it's not perfect because things change, man. Sure, people stay the same, but the technology changes, the culture changes, our knowledge collectively changes. The Founding Fathers, or dudes who debated and created the US Constitution in the early years of the Republic, knew this. They knew that over the years the Constitution would have to be amended or changed to reflect a changing country. Thomas Jefferson once even wrote to his buddy James Madison, quote, "Every Constitution then and every law naturally expires at the end of 19 years. And those first 10 changes came quickly. Just 3.5 years after the founders ratified the original Constitution, they ratified the first 10 changes, commonly referred to today as the Bill of Rights. This was to get those pesky anti-federalists on board with the rest of the Constitution. The states ratified the 11th Amendment 4 years later, the 12th Amendment 9 years after that. However, it took another 61 years to be amended after that. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, also known as the Reconstruction Amendments, were all passed during a crazy time of reform right after the Civil War. After the 15th Amendment, the 16th Amendment didn't come until 43 years later during another crazy time of reform known as the Progressive Era. The last Progressive Era amendment was the 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920. Since then, in the last 100 years, only 8 additional amendments have been ratified. The states ratified the most recent amendment way back in 1992, and that was for an amendment first proposed way back in 1789. So why is it so freaking difficult to amend the Constitution? Well, we can blame the founders. The founders wanted it to be difficult to amend so that the government was more stable and to lock in their great ideals, you know? They also didn't trust the masses much and wanted to make sure it was something that was really important before it altered their beloved document. Hence, it's only been changed 27 times. But there have been some unintended consequences to making the Constitution difficult to change. You see, now we often rely a lot on the Supreme Court to just interpret the Constitution differently to push reform forward. I don't think most of the founders saw that one coming. But say we are about to enter a time of dramatic reform. Maybe we are, who knows? Well, just in case, here are my top 10 proposed constitutional amendments. Think of it as my amendment wish list. I've been thinking about this for a while, but that doesn't mean this list is any good. It's basically me just having fun. Number 10, the right of citizens of the United States who are 16 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Yep, you know it. I want to lower the voting age to 16. 16 and 17-year-olds often work and pay federal income taxes. And they're also legally allowed to drive and can be tried as adults if they commit crimes. Plus, there are plenty of 16 and 17-year-olds who know much more about government and politics than those 18 and older. In fact, I'd argue that the 16 and 17-year-olds of today are smarter than at any other time in American history. Let them have a say. And if you think 16 is too young for the vote, what makes 18 old enough, huh? Number 9, Congress cannot make any laws that apply to American citizens that don't apply equally to themselves, and vice versa. This seems like common sense, and you're likely surprised right now to hear that it's already not part of the Constitution. Well, it's not. One example of this is that up until 1984, members of Congress didn't have to pay Social Security taxes. The next one is an actual proposed amendment almost ratified in the 1970s known as the Equal Rights Amendment, or ERA, and I'm just going to read it word for word here. Number 8, Section 1, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Section 2, the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Section 3, this amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. A big reason why it didn't pass is because folks worried that women would lose special privileges, like not getting drafted to fight in in a war. But I say those special privileges be expanded to everyone, dadgummit. Is the ERA really needed when laws and the courts have mostly done a good job fighting for women's rights? I say yes, because just because you don't see discrimination against women now doesn't mean you won't see it in the future. Oh, and one more thing. You do see discrimination against women now. A lot of times, it's just more under the radar. And look, more rights for women doesn't mean less rights for men. And here's another actual proposed amendment, nicknamed the Saving Democracy Amendment, that I'm also just gonna read word for word here. Number 7, Section 1, the rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons and do not extend to for-profit corporations, limited liability companies, or other private entities established for business purposes or to promote business interests under the laws of any state, the United States or any foreign state. Section 2, such corporate and other private entities established under law are subject to regulation by the people through the legislative process so long as such regulations are consistent with the powers of Congress and the states and do not limit the freedom of the press. Section 3, such corporate and other private entities shall be prohibited from making contributions or expenditures in any election of any candidate for public office or the vote upon any ballot measure submitted to the people. And Section 4, Congress and the states shall have the power to regulate and set limits on all election contributions and expenditures, including a candidate's own spending, and to authorize the establishment of political committees to receive, spend, and publicly disclose the sources of those contributions and expenditures. This is essentially a response to the Citizens United v. FEC Supreme Court decision, which reaffirmed corporate personhood and made it easier for organizations to spend lots and lots of money on political campaigns. Well, as one of my YouTube viewers wrote, quote, "If corporations are people, then they should be able to receive the death penalty." Oh, snap. I agree. Corporations have way too much power over elections in this country. For my 6th favorite proposed amendment, I put it in multiples of 6s. Number 6, term limits for Congress and the Supreme Court. U.S. representatives can't serve more than 12 years, U.S. senators can't serve more than 18 years, and Supreme Court justices can't serve more than 24 years. U.S. representatives also serve 4-year terms, with election years being the non-presidential election years. This opposed to 2 so that they're not constantly running for re-election and could actually focus on, I don't know, legislation. Look, I get that term limits are not perfect, and more term limits actually might cause lobbyists to have even more power and influence in DC. However, I think most of us are just tired of career politicians, and this is the best way to fight that. Number 5, amendments become part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 2/3 of the states or by conventions and 2/3 thereof. So basically, this is just making it easier to amend the Constitution. It'd still be 2/3 of Congress or state conventions to propose amendments, but I want to change it from 3/4 to 2/3 of the state legislatures to be required to ratify them. Currently, that means just 33 states instead of 38. As I explained at the beginning of the video, it's currently really difficult to change the Constitution, which makes no sense as the world is quickly changing. Number 4, the Electoral College will no longer pick the president. American citizens will directly elect the president. Now, at the state level, there could be additional reforms, like implementing ranked choice voting, approval voting, or score voting. I'm still for federalism here. Let the states still run their own elections. However, count every vote. One person, one vote. And if you think I'm naive about the importance of the Electoral College, you are sadly mistaken. Check out my video here where I take down the antiquated Electoral College. My top 3 proposed amendments, collectively think of them as a compromise because they do go together quite well, if I don't mind saying so myself, which I just did. Number 3, the 17th article of amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby repealed. Yep, get rid of the direct election of U.S. senators and return the power of appointing senators to state legislatures. Now hold up, hear me out. There is little evidence that proves that the 17th Amendment did anything to reduce corruption in both the U.S. Senate and in U.S. Senate elections. Plus, this is an appeal to conservatives who want to revive constitutional federalism and limit the power of the federal government, because guess what comes next? Number 2, the U.S. House of Representatives will have 930 members. Congress may increase the House membership after every U.S. census to account for population growth. Currently, the number is 435, so this would more than double the current size of the House, and of course would also make it so that there would be 1,033 electoral votes, assuming the Electoral College still existed. I know this sounds radical, but you just gotta remember that when the Republic first started, each member of the House only represented 30,000 citizens. Today, each House member represents an average of 747,000 citizens. How can one person truly represent that many freaking people? I mean, we've had the same number of representatives since the 1920s. Since then, the country has grown by 208 million people. Now, if Congress just wanted to pass a law to make this happen, they could. The Constitution does not have to be amended to make this happen. However, I think it is important enough that it needs to be added to the Constitution. Oh, and you might be wondering where I'm getting that 930 number? I just pulled it out of thin air. Just kidding, I got it from an article, this article here by Chris Wilson. It's really good. I've linked it in the description of this video. In the article, Wilson uses math to limit disparity in representation using a basic standard deviation. I kind of know what that means, but the bottom line is 930 ends up being the magic number to make sure that each representative is representing around the same amount of people. One big bonus for increasing the representatives in the House is that it would make gerrymandering more difficult. Speaking of which, number 1, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of political beliefs. I know that probably sounds familiar since it's basically the 15th Amendment, but replacing the words race, color, or previous condition of servitude with political beliefs. Since the Supreme Court has already set precedents on racial gerrymandering, but pretty much said, no, we can't do anything about political gerrymandering, I feel this amendment is the best way we can actually fight to make elections more truly representative. So there you have it, my wish list for 10 amendments to be added to the Constitution. There are others I considered, but I just thought weren't fleshed out well enough yet. Which ones do you think should be added? Let me know in the comments, eh? So if you liked any of these, please send the ideas to your representatives in Congress, or maybe your state representatives, or maybe just send it to your grandma and grandpa, or your grandma and grandpa's son or daughter, or their sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, and their brothers and sisters' cousins, and their cousins' dentists, and their dentists' therapists, and their therapists' hairstylists. You know, basically what I'm trying to say is just send this to everyone you ever interact with every day for the rest of your life. Got it? Good. But anyway, yeah, so it's my birthday, so I just figured I'd put this, little birthday wish list together. Seriously though, if you disagree with any of them, then I do want to hear from you, because it's always a work in progress. We can all together make this country good again. If you don't like any of my proposed constitutional amendments, just ignore them, or you can comment below and just tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. Thanks for watching.